I stepped off the plane at Fiumicino Airport, knees stiff from the 9-hour flight, and my hands still clutching the velvet box that held my mother's necklace. I hadn't traveled internationally in years, not since Harold passed, but Corvin insisted. "It wouldn't be right without you, Mom," he'd said. "You're still family." Still. That word had stuck with me during the entire ride over. I wasn't officially invited to Rylessa's birthday in Rome. No formal email, no itinerary. Just a vague promise from my son that I was welcome. That was enough for him, perhaps, but not for me. In the taxi toward my hotel, I texted Rylessa. "Hi, dear, I just landed." "What time is dinner tonight?" I kept it cheerful. Warm. The way mothers are expected to sound. No response. I checked into the hotel, overlooking the Tiber, unpacked slowly, and placed the necklace sterling silver with a lapis center on the desk beside me. It had belonged to my own mother. She'd worn it to every holiday meal and anniversary dinner. I'd had the clasp restored just last month. I thought Rylessa might find it elegant. Still nothing from her. I scrolled through social media. Rylessa had posted a story 2 hours earlier, a photo of a cappuccino in a cafe not far from where I sat now. The caption read, "Final planning touches. Can't wait, planning touches." For a dinner I wasn't given details about. I slipped off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. The air conditioning hummed faintly. I stared at my phone, watching the message remain unread, the 3 dots I'd hoped to see never appearing. By 5 o'clock, I texted Corvin. "Just checking in, what's the address for the dinner tonight?" He replied in under a minute. "Oh, right, Palazzo Orlenti, 7 p.m. See you there." No apology. No acknowledgement of the silence. Just a time and place. I stood, smoothed my dress, and placed the necklace back in its box. Then I picked up my clutch and made my way down to the waiting car. The Palazzo Orlenti shimmered with gold lamplight as I stepped through the iron gate into its courtyard, the cobblestones cool beneath my heels. I'd worn navy silk, a dress Harold had always loved on me, and a pair of earrings Rylessa once complimented, hoping perhaps foolishly for grace in the moment. The maître d' greeted me with a polite nod. "Buonasera." "Nam Signora Mersley," I said. "Alvirine Mersley. I'm with the Crestwood Mersley dinner party." He scanned the list, then blinked. "I see a table for 12. But no one by that name is listed." I glanced past him. They were already there. Corvin Rylessa, her parents, her sisters, even 2 of her old college friends I'd once hosted for Thanksgiving. All seated at a grand table beneath a vine-wrapped pergola, lit by floating candles and lined with white roses. This was the intimate family birthday dinner before the formal gala, with guests and sponsors scheduled for the next evening. I counted 11 guests, 11 chairs. Still, I approached. Corvin looked up startled, though I saw no sign of urgency in his eyes. Just a dim smile. "Mom, you made it." Rylessa didn't stand. She sipped her wine and gave a quick wave. "Oops," she said lightly. "Guess we miscounted." Silly me. No one laughed, not outright, but I heard the rustle of amusement ripple across the table. A waiter appeared with a folding chair. I shook my head. "No need," I said softly. "I won't stay long." I rested the velvet box on the corner of the table next to the untouched breadbasket and gave Corvin a long look, then turned to Rylessa. "Happy birthday," I said. She smiled like she didn't notice the sting behind it. I turned before they could respond, heels clicking over stone, each step measured and quiet. Behind me, champagne glasses clinked. I didn't look back. Down the alley beside the restaurant, I paused at the edge of a fountain and touched the pendant still in my bag. It had never reached her neck. I pulled out my phone. One name in my contacts hadn't changed in 20 years. I pressed it, let it ring, and said just 3 words when he answered. "I need access." Back in my hotel room, I loosened the clasp of my necklace and slipped out of the navy silk, folding it with care, before placing it on the back of the chair. The room felt too quiet. I didn't turn on the television. Instead, I reached for the black binder I always carried when I traveled, not out of habit, but out of memory. Inside were laminated pages, spreadsheets, old schedules from events long past, seating charts for an oil heiress's third wedding, floral palettes for a Nobel Prize dinner, wine pairings for a billionaire's retirement party in Provence. I flipped through them, slowly, letting the names speak for me. These were nights no one dared mishandle. Because I had planned them. I turned to a folded letter tucked inside the back pocket. It was from Margaret Arlotti, the former director of operations at Cielo Roma Catering. She'd been my intern in Boston once. Nervous, sharp, and fast with logistics. I had trained her, mentored her, recommended her for the Rome promotion. I pulled out my phone and searched the catering company's profile. Sure enough, Cielo Roma was listed as the official vendor for the formal birthday gala the next day, March 19th. I opened their website and scanned their emergency procedures. If a primary contact didn't respond, the system defaulted to the last verified secondary. I typed in my old login credentials. The portal let me in. There it was. Under the March 19th booking for our Mersley birthday gala, the emergency contact was still listed as A. Mersley, Senior Advisor Contingency. They hadn't removed me. They'd used my reputation, my vendor relationships, my legacy. And they thought I'd sit at a folding chair and pretend not to notice. I tapped once to open the vendor list. The florist, the quartet, the wine distributor, all still partnered. All still familiar. I clicked Edit Access. Then I reached for a blank page in the binder and began to write line by line. I had always believed in brevity. In my line of work, the fewer words you needed to control a room, the more powerful you were. By midnight, the message was typed, printed, and signed. I walked down to the concierge and requested access to their fax service. The young woman at the desk hesitated when I handed her the paper, but said nothing. I gave her 3 numbers, 1 for the caterer, 1 for the floral designer, and 1 for the musicians. The sentence was clear, final, and stripped of emotion. Please cancel services for March 19th at Palazzo Orlenti. Authority Emergency Contact AM. She sent the faxes, stapled my confirmation receipts, and placed them in a crisp envelope. I tucked it into my purse and returned to my room. I didn't call Corvin. I didn't need to. He had chosen convenience over kindness. He had known they didn't plan for me, hadn't made space for me, hadn't wanted me to sit at that table, but he still let me fly across the ocean. Still let me arrive at a dinner where I had no seat, no name, no welcome. They wanted a show. They would get one. I lay back on the bed and listened to the silence wrap around me like silk. Somewhere in the city, Relessa was likely reapplying lipstick, reviewing her curated guest list, posing by candlelight with borrowed elegance. But tomorrow, the messages would start arriving. A florist with no delivery confirmation. A violinist confused by the last-minute release. A wine distributor refunding the credit authorization. I imagined the puzzled calls, the unanswered emails, the uncertainty blooming just hours before the first guest arrived. The holes that would appear in the seams of their perfect night. It would begin as a whisper, a pause, a glance from a staff member who no longer had instructions, and it would end in silence. Not mine, theirs. The next evening, the courtyard at Palazzo Orlenti gleamed with candlelight and linen, ready for Relessa's grand birthday gala. But something was off from the very beginning. At 7:45 p.m., their first glass of wine still hadn't been poured. The sommelier had vanished, replaced by a nervous young server who kept checking his watch. Relessa waved her hand sharply, asking, "Where is the Rosso di Montalcino?" He stammered, then disappeared into the corridor, and didn't return. The quartet in the corner finished their opening sonata, then stood without a word. One of them zipped a cello into its case, another coiled wires with practiced speed. No encore. No acknowledgement. Guests began to murmur. I imagined Rilesa's smile tightening her voice, dropping to that hissed register I knew well. This is unacceptable. Where is the event coordinator? But there wasn't one. The woman they had leaned on for years, quietly without thanks, was upstairs in a cotton robe sipping elderflower tea and letting the night fold itself in on them. Back in the palazzo kitchen, the head chef read my note again. He'd received the cancellation hours ago and held off only out of loyalty to Margaret's legacy. But with no payment confirmation, no green light from management, and a growing sense of unease, he made the final call. The cake, a 3-tier hazelnut torte, wrapped in spun sugar, was boxed and wheeled back into cold storage. When Rilesa asked for a sneak peek, the pastry chef pretended he hadn't seen it. Corvin rose from his seat and took out his phone. I could see the movement from my balcony. He started to dial, then stopped. His posture changed. His shoulders dipped. Even from this distance, I could tell the moment realization hit. The details, the timing, the vanishing staff. It wasn't random. It was precision. His face went pale as he turned slowly back to the table, lips pressed tight. He knew. He finally knew. The sound of forks clinking against empty plates had given way to low murmurs and restless shifting. Guests were checking their watches, glancing at each other with expressions that teetered between curiosity and irritation. Then Donatelle Marstow, dressed in sequined gold and always the first to weaponize boredom, stood with exaggerated flair. Is this part of the performance? She asked, voice dripping with disdain. Because frankly, it feels amateur. Rilesa's face flushed, not from wine. She stood quickly, trying to recover, motioning for anyone to fix it. We're just experiencing a slight delay, she announced. The wine is on its way. But Donatelle wasn't finished. I've been to 5 of your events, Rilesa. This is the first one where the staff looks more nervous than the guests. She sat down with a heavy sigh, loud enough to make sure it landed. That's when Rilesa's father, Mr. Chelian, pushed back his chair and stormed off toward the service corridor. A few minutes later, he returned, trailed by the restaurant's floor manager. The manager adjusted his tie, gave a curt bow to the guests, and spoke in English for everyone's benefit. We deeply apologize for the interruption, he said. The confusion stems from a formal cancellation we received this morning regarding this event. Rilesa blinked. What cancellation? The manager opened his binder, flipped to a document, and pointed. It was faxed under full authority by the registered emergency contact. One Alvarine Mersley. For a second, no one moved. All eyes turned to Corvin. He remained seated, elbows on the table, fingers pressed together beneath his chin. His voice came low but clear. My mother used to plan global events. High security, high profile. She taught half the vendors in this city. Her name was still on the account. There was a pause as the weight of that admission settled over the table. She had the right, he said at last, lifting his gaze to meet Rilesa's. I didn't take her off the system, because I didn't think I needed to. And with that, the applause in Rilesa's head went silent. They hadn't always been cruel. Just casual with me. Casual in that way people become when they know you'll always show up, always pick up the check, always stay quiet to keep the peace. I remember the first time Rilesa called me traditional with that tight little smile. It was at their engagement party. I had offered to host something simple, just close friends, a garden lunch with music. But she said, thank you, but your taste is more maternal. That word, how she stretched it like it meant plain. She hired a luxury planner instead and made me sit behind a peony arrangement so large I couldn't see half the speeches. Then there were the years of polite distance. She called when they needed upgrades to the house, a loan for a car tuition for her sister's design course. Each time her voice chirped with charm until the transfer cleared. Then silence. No thank you cards. No visits. Corvin was no better. When Harold passed, I set aside a portion of my retirement fund for something meaningful. Travel, maybe. A conservatory. Corvin asked to borrow it for a can't-miss bistro project in Providence. He showed me the renderings, called me his first investor, even brought me a signed apron from the chef. The place closed in 9 months. He never spoke of the money again. And I let it go, because that's what I did. I let things go. But tonight, as the news spread from table to table that the birthday dinner had collapsed under my quiet command, I didn't feel vindictive. I felt awake. I had spent years teaching others how to make people feel special, how to create tables where everyone belonged. Yet I was treated like a folding chair they could set up last minute or forget entirely. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about stepping out from under the linen cloth they'd used to cover me. I didn't need to raise my voice. I had finally raised myself. And I was just getting started. 2 weeks after returning to Rhode Island, I found a small envelope tucked between utility bills and grocery flyers. The handwriting was familiar, rounded, careful, as if trying too hard to be sweet. It was from Rylessa. Inside, a belated birthday card, all florals and scripted gold. I opened it slowly, half expecting a note of apology. Instead, a $5 Starbucks gift card fluttered out, and above the printed, "Wishing you joy," someone had written. "Thanks again for coming." That was it. No mention of the missing chair. No mention of the canceled dinner. No acknowledgement of what we all knew had happened in that candlelit courtyard. Just $5 of coffee and a sentence so hollow it echoed. I laughed. I laughed louder than I had in months. The card sat on the edge of my kitchen counter as I pulled out a thick manila folder labeled Nor Culinary Foundation. Inside were the signed transfer papers. I had moved the remainder of Harold's estate, every remaining cent of it, into a charitable trust to support aspiring culinary students, the ones who reminded me of my former interns, the ones who called me Ms. Mersley with respect, in their voices, not a smirk. The trust would cover scholarships, internships, and small business grants for food-based startups run by women over 50. The board would have 5 members. I would chair it until the end of my days. Corvin wasn't even listed as a backup trustee. He'd never asked about the trust. He assumed it would pass to him eventually, as if entitlement had legal weight, as if inheritance were a birthright rather than a relationship built on care. Let him find out through silence. Let the lawyers explain it when the time came, when the documents were filed and the balance sheets didn't mention his name. Let him wonder how a woman he hadn't invited to the table had in the end taken the table with her, and the silver, and the wine list, and every last chair. It started as a whisper online. A single post from one of Rylessa's guests, a fashion columnist who'd been live posting the Rome trip for her readers. Most disastrous birthday dinner in Rome history. Staff vanished. No wine, no cake, no host, no class. Within 24 hours, the post had over 40,000 likes. Comments rolled in from food critics, ex-colleagues, even a few former collaborators of mine. Some called it karma. Others called it sabotage. Rylessa's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Her blog, once a curated shrine to effortless elegance, lost 3 sponsors in a week. She posted a cryptic message about unexpected disruptions and went quiet. I thought that might be the end of it. Then, one rainy afternoon, there was a knock at my door. Corvin. He looked older. Not tired, ashamed. He stood there in a thin jacket, no umbrella hair damp and clinging to his forehead. "Mom," he said, "can I come in?" I didn't answer. Just stepped aside and let him drip onto the hardwood. He sat at the table where I once helped him memorize flashcards, where he signed his first loan papers. Now he stared at the steam rising from the mug I handed him, as if unsure whether he deserved to touch it. "I know what you did," he said. "The trust? The dinner? All of it." I said nothing. "Why would you do that to us?" I didn't raise my voice. I simply picked up my planner, worn and bookmarked, with years of names and notations. I flipped to the current week and pointed at the bottom of the page. Under family, it was blank. No names, no initials. Just an empty line. Corvin stared. His lips parted like he might speak, but I closed the planner before he could find the words. Then I turned the page. The next one was already filled, 5 columns, color-coded. Foundation final interviews. Grant distribution confirmed. Opening gala confirmed. Apprentices all lodged. There was no place left for him on the schedule. Only forward. The dining hall was modest. No chandeliers, no imported roses, no photographers angling for a brand mention. Just the smell of caramelized onions, slow-roasted rosemary chicken, and the laughter of people who had never once asked me for a checkbook. The apprentices, 9 of them now, had prepared the evening in secret. I wasn't to lift a finger. That had been their only rule. I'd taught them about balance restraint, how to plate with purpose, how to season with patience. Tonight they returned it all with quiet reverence. When I entered, I paused. The table was long made from reclaimed pine, lined with mismatched chairs and cloth napkins folded by hand. And at the head of the table, a carved seat with my name stitched across a linen sash. Above my plate sat a small card that read simply, "La Mersley." Slow braised lamb over lemon farro with herbed yogurt. I laughed, then cried, then sat down. They served each dish like it was sacred. One of them, Ava, raised her glass first. For the woman who fed more than mouths, who fed futures. I looked around at them, women in their 50s who thought it was too late to start over, single fathers, learning to bake again, a retired bus driver who now knew how to make pâte à choux. They had not asked who I was, once married to. They had not questioned my choices. They only knew I had said yes to them when others hadn't. I raised my glass in return. They excluded me from one dinner. I said, voice steady, so I built 100 more without them. We toasted. No speeches. No photographers. Just the sound of forks clinking against joy. Later that night, after the dishes were done and the last light dimmed, I stood alone for a moment at the edge of the empty table. It was the same kind of quiet I had once feared. But now, it felt earned. Full. Because I had learned something no folded chair ever could teach me: the only seat that matters is the one you give yourself.